when you make a bad choice, God doesn't necessarily let you abandon you and leave you to your own fate. Even when you make a bad choice, God still has to decide what's going to happen to you and from your bad choice, and how is it going to affect other people. It's not like you can do whatever you want and it's a free-for-all. So even when a person makes a bad choice, in some way, God protects you from your own bad choice. Like, for example, a person decides to hurt themselves. Bad choice. God decides, no, I'm not going to let them. So they fail. They try, but they fail. Because God says, no, I don't want you to hurt yourself. So you can choose to do it. Doesn't mean you're going to succeed at doing it, because God is still in charge of what happens. So your choice was totally bad, but God likes bad people too. So as long as we're on the topic, if you stop the sin, you will not repeat that sin. That's tshuva. Tshuva means you returned. You stopped being into the sin, now you're out of the sin. That's it, you did tshuva. What about the fasting and the apologizing and the saying tachnun and beating your chest, and what is all that? That's in addition to tshuva. You know that God is no longer angry at you, and he will not punish you for this sin. But it's not like you never sinned. So to clean it up, you do all these extra things. But the forgiveness was already there. And that's why Yom Kippur is not a day of forgiveness. Kippur doesn't mean forgiveness. Kippur means cleansing. You want to erase even the memory of it, but you're already forgiven when you stopped sinning, which could have been before Yom Kippur. Let's put it in different terms. You did something you really should not have done, and you violated God's commandment. God said no, and you did it anyway. So, okay, you stop sinning. And God says, I forgive you. God forgives you for violating his commandment. How do you respond to the forgiveness? How should you feel about God forgiving you? Imagine you did something horrible to your friend, and you regret it because you really still want to be friends. So you promise never to do it again, and your friend says, it's okay, I forgive you. How do you feel about that? The forgiveness makes you realize what a friend she is. She's willing to forgive you after what you did? Well, she's really a friend. So if God is willing to forgive you and does forgive you, how do you respond to that? What do you make of that? You say, oh, good, I'm forgiven. No, your relationship with God has just improved, quadrupled. Now it's a whole different relationship. Now you got to be really appreciative and thankful and grateful and thrilled that you have such a relationship where you can violate and then be forgiven. So for that, you bring a korban, you make a special party, You thank God in some way for being so forgiving, because forgiveness is an event. You can't just take it for granted. So first, you apologize, you stop sinning. Then you get the forgiveness. And then you can't get over the fact that God forgave you. So you want to do something special. That's kapara. After forgiveness, you want kapara. You want the relationship to be so much more beautiful than it was before, because you can't get over the fact that he forgives you. So the forgiveness is not the end. You sinned, he forgave you, finished. No, not finished. He forgave you? It's like that student, a simple boy, spent some time in Crown Heights. And he learned a lot, and he started doing mitzvahs. And one day he came back from campus to get dollars from the Rebbe. And he was he looked very sad. And the Rebbe said to him, "Why aren't you smiling?" He said, "Because I've been very bad this week. I didn't put on the tefillin." So the Rebbe said, "Then you should smile about the mitzvahs you did do." He says, "No, this was a very bad week. I didn't do any mitzvahs." So the Rebbe said, "Then you should be very happy." He said, "About what?" He said, "About the fact that you were so bad this whole week and God still wants you to do his mitzvahs." So the forgiveness is the beginning of a whole new relationship. It's not the end of a problem. You haven't just solved a problem. I thought I was in trouble, but no, he forgives me. I'm not in trouble. That's it. That's not a relationship. That's like getting away with a speeding ticket. If you can get away with it, fine, then it's over. It's not a relationship. With God, you're having a relationship. If he forgives you, it's like, wow, why would he forgive me? Why does he still want me after what I did? I'm more important to him than his own commandments? Well, then he should be more important to me than my opinions or my weaknesses or my shtick. So what about a person who says, "I know God forgives me, but I don't forgive myself. I'm going to continue to be miserable because I don't forgive myself"? What is that? Is that like a very moral, good person? Shana says no, vehemently. Not forgiving yourself is the Yetzer Hara. It's not your moral instinct, it's your immoral instinct. Because saying, "I don't forgive myself," takes all the attention away from God, as if you sinned against yourself and now you have to forgive yourself. You're leaving God out of the picture. That's not moral. You did something to hurt your mother. You apologize. She forgives you. Yeah, but you can't forgive yourself. So now it's not about your mother anymore. So who is it about? See, the reason you did something bad in the first place is because you were just thinking about yourself. So now that you're doing tshuva and you can't forgive yourself, well, guess what you're doing? You're thinking about yourself again. Well, that got you in trouble in the first place. And besides, how does it make sense that you are the criminal and you are the judge? You can forgive your own, but I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You can't be the criminal and the judge. So forgive yourself makes no sense at all. Nobody is asking you about your opinion about yourself. So what does it mean I can't forgive myself? I'm so disappointed in myself that I could actually do that I can't get over myself. There was this woman who suffered for 30 years, went through all sorts of therapy and all sorts of treatment, miserable, miserable. And it turns out when the therapist finally got down to where the problem came from, it turns out that when she was 6 years old, her mother disciplined her or told her something. She doesn't remember what it was. But what she does remember is that she thought to herself, I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to stab her. That's how angry she was at 6 years old. When she caught herself thinking that, she went into shock. I'm a really evil person. And she never got over it. For 30 years, she couldn't forgive herself for having had such a thought, such an impulse. On the one hand, you can say, well, you see, that's a really good person. She's a really sensitive soul. It is shocking and upsetting that you can actually think like that. Why should she forgive herself? How can she live with herself? How can she trust herself and like herself? She's a dangerous person. On the other hand, it ruined her life. For 30 years, her life was miserable. And then when they discovered that that's where the source of the problem, how did that make it any better? So how did they fix it? So if you look in Tanya, the source of all wisdom, what would it say in Tanya? If you had such a horrible impulse and such a horrible thought, what should you make of it? Should you be miserable? Tanya actually asks that question. How miserable should you be when you discover that about yourself? And Tanya says, you should be happy. You should be grateful and thankful that you had such a thought and such an impulse, but you didn't do it. That's called a good person. A good person is not someone who never gets into a bad mood. A good person is someone who, even when they're in a bad mood, doesn't do anything bad. So it's like saying, to be a good person doesn't mean you have no Yetzer Hara. A good person doesn't do what the Yetzer Hara suggests. That's a good person. Not have a Yetzer Hara? Okay, that's a tzaddik. Not everybody needs to be a tzaddik. So not only shouldn't she be upset about what happened when she was 6 years old, she should be impressed and thankful that even at 6 years old, she knew better than to do it. So what makes her a good person? Not having bad thoughts or not listening to bad thoughts? So imagine you're a good person, but your neighbor comes over to you and says, you know what? I think you should stab your mother. That's it? You're not a good person anymore? That thought comes from your Yetzer Hara. You didn't do it. That's who you are. So that the Yetzer Hara can have nasty ideas, why are you surprised? Of course, the Yetzer Hara can say ridiculous things. But if you're wise enough and strong enough to say no, you're a success. You're doing exactly what God created you to do. So in some way or to some degree, you should consider your Yetzer Hara a neighbor with bad ideas. It's not you. You and your Yetzer Hara are different, separate, independent. And the proof is the Yetzer Hara said, stab your mother, and you didn't.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
What if she does stab her mother?
What?
What if she does stab her mother? Like, what if...
Oh, then she's an orphan.
But can you say the same thing about after somebody does do the sin? Like, what if after the fact, right, someone's looking back and they did do the sin? Are they just as necessary and important and okay and whatever?
Okay, so after a person commits any sin, and now he's upset, regrets it. So who is the person doing the sin and who is the person regretting the sin? It can't be the same person. I really enjoyed my sin, but now I'm miserable because of the sin. Can you make up your mind? So real tshuva means you separate yourself from the one who did the sin and become independent, a different person. And this different person would never do that sin. And this is where the Yetzer Hara really traps you, confuses you. When you do the sin, which the Yetzer Hara convinced you to do, once you do it, the Yetzer Hara turns around and says, you know, you're disgusting. I just made a suggestion. I didn't think you would actually do it, you animal. And you believe that you're an animal. So now you've believed your Yetzer Hara twice. First you believed him to do the sin, and now you're believing him that you're an animal. Stop listening to your Yetzer Hara. That's what real tshuva means. Real tshuva means I did the sin, but no, I am not an animal. I have a conscience. I would never do that again. And that's the real me. So it's always a question of who are you really? Because there seems to be so many sides to you. You can be smart, you can be foolish, you can be responsible, you can be irresponsible. You can be so many things. Who are you really? You're in a good mood, you're in a bad mood. You understand everything that's being taught. All of a sudden, you don't understand anything. What's going on? Who are you? That's an important question. But don't ever believe that you are who your Yetzer Hara says you are. Never believe the Yetzer Hara. So who are you really? Look in Tanya. Tanya says, you are a Beinani. A Beinani means you have a Yetzer Hara, The Yetzer Hara has some nasty suggestions. You don't listen, and you're perfect. You did listen. That was a mistake. Sorry. That's not me. It ain't going to happen again. That's you. The you that is independent of your Yetzer Hara, that's the real you. And you can be independent by not sinning. You can be independent by rejecting the sin that you already did. No, that's not me. I'm not going there anymore. Let's put it a different way. Real tshuva is possible because the real you never did the sin. That makes sense? Even while you're sinning, the real you is saying, no, please don't do that. I don't want to do that. So when you sin, you're sinning against your better judgment. So the real you is saying, no, I don't want to do this. So once the sin is done and you calm down, the real you says, why did you do this to me? I asked you not to do this. So where does your regret come from? Where does tshuva come from? What do you mean you did the sin and now you regret you did the sin? Can't you make up your mind? You did make up your mind. You regret the sin because you never wanted to do it. So what made you do it? You lost your mind. That was not the real you. So it's not like you wanted to sin and now you regret the sin. No, you never wanted to sin. But the insanity was stronger than your opinion. So you sinned. But now that the sin is over and you're back to being sane, like, why'd you do that? The part of you that remains innocent is what your conscience is about. You're not schizophrenic. You're consistent. You're innocent. You want to be innocent. You objected to the sin, and you regret the sin. You're consistent. The sin is weird, not you. One little thought, maybe we'll talk about it later some more, but very quickly, what is a conscience? We always think of guilty conscience, but what is a human conscience? Let's say you never did anything wrong and there's nothing to feel guilty about. Do you still have a conscience? If you lived on an island and you don't know right, wrong, mitzvah, sin, you don't know anything. So you're not guilty. You don't feel guilty about anything. Do you still have a conscience? So the Torah says, yes, you do. What is your conscience? Something worries you. Something in the back of your mind is asking, are you doing what you're supposed to do? Are you fulfilling your purpose? You didn't do anything wrong. You don't feel guilty. But what nags you in the back of your mind is, so is this what my life is supposed to be? So conscience means a sense of purpose, not necessarily guilt. We have a sense that I'm supposed to be doing something. Am I doing that or am I doing something else? That's conscience. So it doesn't have to be guilty conscience. And that's what Hasidus emphasizes. Don't focus so much on your guilty conscience. Focus on your healthy conscience. The voice that says, am I doing what I'm supposed to? That's a healthy conscience. You once did what you're not supposed to. Okay, drop it already. Whereas in other philosophies and other schools of Yiddishkeit, there's a great emphasis on the guilty conscience. It's not so productive. Better to focus on the healthy conscience.